What's going on, everyone? So yesterday, the Chicago Bulls lost their fourth straight game, losing to the Brooklyn Nets, falling to 5-13 on the season. They are now the 13th seed in the Eastern Conference and 4 games out of just making the play-in. Now, it is still early in the season. They've only played 18 games, but this is a good sign. And why is this a good sign? Because of the DeMar DeRozan and Zach Lavine potential trades. Obviously, we're not trading for both of them, but to acquire either one of those two, we need Chicago to continue to be bad, right? If Chicago was good this year and Chicago was kind of cruising and maybe they were the opposite as what they are right now and they had a winning record, then there's the concern that, hey, maybe Chicago wouldn't pull the trigger on a Zach Lavine trade. Because in my opinion, I think the Zach Lavine trade is going to be the first domino that falls. If once they trade Lavine, then all the other pieces will fall in line. And the Lakers, whether they are the ones that end up trading for Lavine or somebody else trades for Lavine, eventually you're going to see that first domino to fall. And then personally, I hope that the Lakers land DeMar DeRozan. Either of these guys solve a lot of the Lakers' issues. Now, before I dive into it, I just want to say that don't expect any type of trade anytime soon. But the even reason I want to highlight the Bulls' record and stuff is because it is something we need to kind of keep an eye on. I don't see the Lakers or the Bulls just magically turning it around, but we need them to continue to be bad, because as they continue to be bad, that gives the Chicago Bulls more and more of a reason. That also kind of has Zach Lavine, DeMar DeRozan kind of push towards, hey, yeah, get me out of here, right? Especially DeMar DeRozan, him being a free agent after this season. You got to imagine that he's not happy about this. I mean, he's already gotten ejected in a game, right? Like, the frustrations are starting to pile on. But as far as these two go, either one of them would be a huge asset for the Lakers. Lakers need a consistent go-to scorer. The Lakers need somebody that can just provide some alleviation from Anthony Davis and LeBron James. And also be a guy that in those games where Anthony Davis does have a bad shooting night, you have somebody that can kind of offset that in a DeMar DeRozan, right? Now, breaking down these two sort of individually, because both do very similar things and would help the Lakers in very similar ways, but both of them also have different things that they go about. So the first one that I kind of want to dive into is Zach Lavine. Now, Zach Lavine is the obvious answer, the more athletic one, right? He's the one that would provide more rim pressure from an offensive standpoint. He's also been historically the better three-point shooter, although DeMar DeRozan is actually hitting the three ball pretty good. And I'll dive into that here in a little bit. But as far as Zach Lavine and his production and what he's been able to do, he's having a bit of a rough season as far as just production and shooting the basketball goes. Now, when you look at this stuff, though, I want people to keep in mind, he's very likely already checked out. One, he knows he's very likely to be traded at some point. Chicago's losing steadfast. All right, so you're going to have these frustrations with Zach Lavine and very likely DeMar DeRozan. But Zach Lavine, thus far this season in 16 games, he's shooting 45.4% from the field, which in some ways is not bad, but compared to what Zach Lavine usually does, he's usually around a 49 to 50% field goal percentage shooter. 3-point range, which is what his big, allure is, right? Like, this is a guy that shoots 7 to 8 threes a game, usually shoots around, 38 to 40%. This season, he is shooting 35% from three. He's averaging 22.3 points. He's also doing it on 17 field goal attempts per game. So he's not being as productive as he has in previous seasons. Again, he's not bad, right? Like, if he just on a nightly basis gave us 22 points per game, that would be massive. Also, he would be going from a Chicago Bulls team that's bad to a Laker team that's good, but also going from basically him and DeMar DeRozan being it to a team in the Lakers that has LeBron James and Anthony Davis, where he essentially just becomes the third option. He would get looks and opportunities scoring the basketball unlike anything he's probably ever gotten in his career. His ability to play off the ball defensively doesn't give you much defensively. He has his moments, but nothing crazy to really write home about. My biggest problem with Zach Lavine, look, if the Lakers trade for Zach Lavine, I'm going to be pumped. I'm going to be excited. I'm going to be happy. Because this is a guy that gives you 3-level scoring, over-the-top shooting, a guy that can consistently go and just apply rim pressure and shoot the ball and just give you 20-plus points a game, which the Lakers could really use. But my biggest concern is just his salary, right? And you can make an argument that that's one of the reasons why the Lakers probably get him, is because of his salary, because not many teams are going to be able to trade for Zach Lavine. And that's also one of the reasons why, like, many of the reports right now are that the pool for Zach Lavine is very small right now, right? There's very few teams that are reaching out about Zach Lavine because, one, outside of a couple contenders, are not going to really be interested in Zach Lavine. And then those teams, like, what are they going to have to give up to get Zach Lavine? Right? So Chicago's very likely not going to get this huge return for Lavine. But Lavine's 28 years old, so he's still very young. He still has a long career ahead of him, depending on how he holds up health-wise, right? He's had some health concerns over the last few years, and that could be another big concern for the Lakers to acquire him. The only reason I'm not, like, super worried about it is because the last 2 seasons, he's been better. Like, last year, he played 77 games. So if he can do that this year for the Lakers, then that would be fine, right? 77 games is perfect. He only missed 5 games. And then even the year prior to that, he played 67 games. So if he can do that, that would be, again, great. But DeMar DeRozan is who ideally I want to see the Lakers acquire. I think he's the one that provides, he doesn't have the athleticism and the rim pressure. He's also older. He's 34 as opposed to 28, but he's much more reasonable salary-wise. We know he wants to be a Laker. We know he'll re-sign with the Lakers. And one of the big concerns that many people have is like, oh, well, he's, a terrible three-point shooter. He's been rough. He's actually been pretty good this year. So like even last night, he shot 50% from 3. He was 2 of 4 from 3-point range. But starting with the 3-point percentage, he's shooting the same as Zach Lavine at 35.1%, right? So he's not shooting terrible. They're both shooting 35% on the season. Granted, Zach Lavine's shooting 7 to 8 threes a game, where DeMar's shooting like roughly 2.5 a game. But he's also averaging 21.1 points. And again, having a bit of struggles, 44.3% from the field, as opposed to him usually being a lock at bare minimum 50%, right? The last 2 seasons, he shot exactly 50.4% from the field. Exactly, right? And so this year, you see DeMar DeRozan, 44.3. You see Lavine shooting around 45%. And that is definitely a point of concern, right? Again, I'm not too worried about it. Just because I really do think a lot of it has to do with just the situation that they're in, right? You see teams, or you see players all the time, they're kind of stuck in a bad team, bad situation. They know it's the end. Frustrations start piling up. You're losing. It's like the effort and energy isn't there, whether you realize it or not. So I'm not really concerned about DeMar DeRozan or Zach Lavine being productive once they get to the Lakers. And like I mentioned, they're going to end up being the third option as opposed to the first and second option. So it's just a different place. And to me, it's kind of like, pick your poison. Like, who would you rather have, DeMar DeRozan or Zach Lavine? I do think Zach Lavine can be more impactful. Like, the ceiling is higher with Lavine. But I think DeMar DeRozan is more consistent, right? Like, when Zach Lavine is on, that dude is ridiculous, right? Absolutely ridiculous. And his ability to just be the high flyer that he is would go a long way with the Lakers. But he has these games where he's rough, right? And he has games where he'll just completely shoot you out of games. Now, granted, does that happen if he's on the Lakers with LeBron and stuff? Maybe not. But it is a point of concern where DeMar DeRozan, he's basically a constant, right? Like game in and game out, night in and night out, year in and year out, you're going to get the same production from him like clockwork, right? And on top of that, DeMar DeRozan has been one of the better clutch players. He's also been one of the better closers in the league, especially the last few years. And not last year, but the year prior, he led the league in it. Now, you might ask, well, what's up with him this year? Well, when you're not in games and you're getting smacked and blown out, and it's being a disaster, it's kind of hard to be clutch and close games, right? You have to be within striking range. But we have seen moments where like DeMar's hit some big shots down the stretch of some of these games. Again, very small sample size because they haven't won much. But my biggest reason for wanting DeMar DeRozan is you can just get more than DeMar. And you don't have to give up as much. If anything, you can make the argument you have to give up less, right? Because he is an expiring contract. How many teams are going to be interested in trading for him? And on top of that, how many teams are, going to be willing to give up the pieces necessary for a 34-year-old, right? Like, and DeMar's only going to want to go to a couple teams. If he's going anywhere, he wants to go to somebody that's going to be a contender, right? Because he's 34 years old. The Lakers make a world of sense for DeMar. Like, if you could get DeMar DeRozan, Andre Drummond, and Alex Caruso, then I think you go do that. But if you can't get all those other guys, and it's like, maybe you just get an Andre Drummond and a Zach Lavine, again, I wouldn't hate it. Like, tomorrow, if we found out the Lakers traded for Lavine, I'm going to be pumped. I'm going to be excited. Like, I think he's a real piece that could help put us over the top. But I think DeMar DeRozan would be more willing to kind of fit in. There's also questions with just Zach Lavine and his, the way he conducts himself at times, right? His personal issues, right? Like, so I don't know. His attitude can be a problem, right? So DeMar, I just think he'd come in, he'd understand his role, he'd know his role, he'd be able to fit in. He's talked about how he could shoot the 3-point shot. He just doesn't take it very often. Maybe he does that more. I don't know. It just, again, to me, I'm okay with it either way. Again, nothing's happening anytime soon. We got to get through like at least till the middle of January, if not, the trade deadline before anything happens. But like I said, this is something that is good. Just something I wanted to highlight and point out and kind of, make everyone aware. Like this is a positive thing that Chicago is continuing to struggle because we need them to. The more they struggle, the more likely it is that Chicago is going to end up trading everybody. Because, look, you might say they're definitely going to trade him this year, all that stuff. We heard all these same rumors last year. Chicago has been very stubborn and should have traded everybody a year ago. I was screaming for it a year ago, and yet they were stubborn, right? And even DeMar DeRozan, they talked about how they want him to re-sign and stuff. One, I don't see DeMar doing that. Two, I think that's just PR, right? Like you just what are they supposed to say? No, DeMar, we want him off the team as soon as possible. Nah, you play the game. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, so I pass the question on to you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? Which one would you rather have? However you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I'd love to hear it. Let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. It helps me out a lot. Lets me know you enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. If not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one.